record now, folks.
We have Commissioner Hudley and we have Commissioner Turley.
All right. Like our audience is a little smaller tonight, but I know at least one city is holding their council meeting tonight. Maybe others are. So perhaps folks had divided loyalties. It is 6:30, so I believe we can begin. We'll call the meeting of the Santa Barbara County Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission to order at 6:30 p.m. Let's begin with a roll call, please.
District 1, Commissioner Katz.
Present.
District 1, Commissioner Twibell.
Present.
District 2, Commissioner McClintock.
Present.
District 2, Commissioner Turley.
Present.
District 3, Commissioner Bradley.
Present.
District 3, Commissioner Hudley.
Present.
District 4, Commissioner Gray.
Present.
And Commissioner Murty is not present, and we'll be accepting her resignation later in the meeting. District 5, Commissioner Morris.
Present.
District 5, Commissioner Rios.
Present.
And member at large, Commissioner Olmedo.
Present.
Very good. Next on our agenda, we'll open the meeting for some public comment. Again, this would be particularly relevant for anybody that has public comment to make prior to the commission going into closed session on the potential legal issue that is before us. But we'll also take general public comment at this time. Ms. Tilton, would you explain how that will work this evening and get us started, please?
Today's meeting is being held remote virtually only through the Zoom webinar. The webinar information is identified on the public agenda. The meeting is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the internet at www.countyofsb.org/redistricting.sbc. Public participation during the meeting can only be done through the webinar Zoom webinar link or by calling the phone number provided on the agenda. For those using the Zoom webinar link, please indicate that you wish to speak during public comment by selecting the raise your hand feature, and staff will know to call on you. When called upon, please state your name for the record. Attendees by phone can raise your hand by pressing *9. When it's your turn to speak, we will announce you by caller ID or your phone number. When called upon, please state your name for the record. We reserve the right to mute a microphone for profane, harassing, or offensive language, or for speaking beyond the time limit set. The time limit for public comment is set at 3 minutes. Recordings of the commission meetings, agendas, supplemental materials, and minutes of the commission are available on the website at the same redistricting webpage cited earlier at www.countyofsb.org/redistricting.sbc.
Thank you. Do we have anybody who has a hand raised?
Yes, we have 2 people desiring to speak. The first is Lee Heller.
Ms. Heller, you're keeping your streak alive as our first in.
Chair Morris and commissioners, the reason for this is that I'm also supposed to be at the Lompoc City Council for an agenda item. And in the miracle of modern technology, I can do that. I'm going to be really brief because the presentation I'm supposed to watch is starting. And this is just to express gratitude and regret about Commissioner Murty, or now Dr. Murty, needing to resign. But I think it is important to take a moment to appreciate what he has tried to do. And I don't know that I'll be back in time for when you discuss what to do about her resignation. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and also to recognize in her resignation letter that she makes a suggestion that I made a couple of weeks ago, that this might provide an opportunity for you to cure the problem with an insufficiency of Republican and Latinx representation. So go forth and be productive, and I hope to be back later, and thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conlon, good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening. Chair Morrison, Commissioners, thank you. William Conlon from District 4. Unlike previous meetings, I will not be able to stay for the duration tonight, so I'd appreciate the opportunity for you to listen to my public comments related to item 14 on tonight's agenda at this time, if that's all right.
Go ahead, please.
Following up on my public comments from last week's meeting, I am deeply disturbed and frustrated by NDC's continued involvement in this incredibly important work that you have undertaken. My confidence was significantly eroded when NDC failed to address the issues related to appointment demographics, which now finds this entire commission in a questionable legal position, most notably referring to the letters from the Republican Party and the Hispanic Chamber. Additional research has revealed NDC's long history of legal issues, including court cases that specifically call out Mr. Johnson. I'm referring to Juragai et al. Versus City of Palmdale in 2013 and Sanchez Noonan versus City of Martinez in 2020. Citing the former, quote, "While defendant's decision to adopt district elections is commendable, its process of drawing council districts went off the rails from the outset," unquote. That sounds very familiar, doesn't it? This commission has experienced an equally disruptive failure to be advised at the hands of the NDC. I would like to also cite public information regarding NDC's advising in a North Carolina partisan gerrymandering case in which Johnson's questionable advice is called out on numerous occasions. Again, all public knowledge and easily accessible online. I ask that this commission strongly consider its options before moving too much further in this critically important work that you're all taking in. Thank you again and have a great meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Conlon. Ms. Tilton, anyone else at this point?
Yes, we have Andy Caldwell.
Good evening, Mr. Caldwell.
Good evening. Thank you for serving this community. What you're doing is one of the most important things that could happen. I am very fond of a saying that politicians, voters don't pick their elected officials pick their voters. And they do that by drawing lines, but thankfully you guys are drawing the lines. I just want to raise an objection. I am absolutely shocked that your council allowed somebody, a member of your commission, to speak on an agenda item during public comment. I don't know, many of you don't know me. I've been a government watchdog for 30 years, and I've read the Brown Act probably a dozen times over that time. Public comment, general public comment is only for items that are not on the agenda. And so what just happened is your council allowed a member to speak on an agenda item that's on the agenda later. And that's just not allowed. Now, the chair could have made a special provision to call that item and move it forward in the agenda, but you didn't do it. I'm no lawyer. I sometimes pretend to be, but I'm trying not to right now, but I'm like shocked. And I think your council needs to explain the ramifications of that from his opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Caldwell, just a point of clarification. Are you under the impression that Mr. Collins is a member of the commission?
How did he identify himself?
As a resident of District 4.
Okay, I thought he was a representative of District 4. Anyway, so that's okay, but either way, person's not allowed to comment on something later on in the agenda during public comment. So I misunderstood him. I thought he said he was representing District 4.
No problem. Thank
Either
you.
way is not allowed. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Churchwell or Mr. Johnson, any staff response to any of the public comment this evening?
I will say the way it was handled was absolutely perfect under the Brown Act.
Mr. Johnson, anything you wish to share or respond to tonight?
No, not at this time. Thanks.
Very good. We will close this portion of the public comment. I will remind the audience, as Mr. Caldwell has indicated, there will be opportunity to speak later this evening on agenda items yet to come. At this point, commissioners, I'm going to bring it to you. We have item number 3. And this is, again, kind of an opportunity for us to either continue with our current leadership and or to make a permanent selection of a chair and vice chair for the commission. Ms. Pilton, any staff report on this item, or are we ready for discussion?
Well, at this, we would be in the same situation as we were in the last meeting staff's recommendation, and this meeting staff's recommendation would be to consider continuing with the interim chair and vice chair until there's possible action taken on the demand letter received from the Hispanic Chamber and the Republican Party for Santa Barbara County.
And just from a procedural standpoint, maybe Mr. Churchwell, let me ask you, if that's the wish of the commission, do we need to affirmatively make a motion and agree to that, or by not taking action, does the current status continue?
The no action is the way to do it. Yes.
Okay. So is there anybody on the commission that wishes to take action to change the current status of commission leadership? Not seeing any, we're going to move forward, which would be to approve the minutes of our January 11th meeting. Could I have a motion to accept the minutes, or are there corrections to be made? Commissioner Bradley.
I move to accept the minutes as provided without correction.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner McClintock seconds. Ms. Tilton, could you do a roll call?
Commissioner Katz,
Aye.
Commissioner Twibell,
Aye.
Commissioner McClintock,
Aye.
Commissioner Turley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Hudley,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Aye.
Commissioner Rios,
Aye.
Commissioner Olmedo,
Aye.
and Chair Morris.
Aye.
Motion carries
Thank you.
10-0.
Item 5 is a disclosure of ex parte communications. Before I open and poll the commission, Ms. Tilden, last meeting we talked about creating a form. Were you prepared with that tonight, or do we want to bring that later?
We'll bring that at a future meeting.
Very good. Thank you. So let me just go through the list, and if you could get if anybody has anything to report. Commissioner Katz.
No.
Very good. Commissioner Twibell,
No.
Commissioner McClintock.
I spoke with Mr. Churchwell earlier today to get clarification on an issue regarding financial disclosures on Form 700, but otherwise nothing.
Thank you. Commissioner Turley.
Yes, I spoke with Santa Barbara City Councilwoman Megan Herman and Senior Housing Program Specialist Lucille Boss very briefly about the expected timeline for the census returns and the redistricting process on January 23rd.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Bradley.
No, nothing new.
Commissioner Hudley.
No, nothing.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Gray.
Nothing.
Commissioner Rios.
Nothing.
And Commissioner Olmedo.
Nothing to report.
And I also have nothing to report this evening. So with that, we are going to now move to closed session. Let me, Ms. Tilton, could you announce the reason for that and explain the procedure both for the commissioners and for the public.
Okay, so shortly the commission will be recessing to closed session. The purpose of the closed session will be and is anticipated litigation provided under Government Code Section 54956.9. The meeting is expected to be likely 30 minutes for those who are trying to plan. Do you agree, Chair Morris? Likely 30?
We will be as expeditious as we can.
Okay. And then once that meeting is over, we'll be coming back in this forum. So those members of the public who want to stay on this forum, this line will stay open. You'll see the commissioners leave, but they will be rejoining. Commissioners, I just sent you a reminder email entitled placeholder for closed session. And as with last week, you'll be accessing the meeting through that form.
Very good. Without any other questions or comments, we will recess to closed session. Commissioners, we'll see you in the other link.
I had my second vaccine today.
Yay.
Sorry. No, I'm feeling kind of funky.
Don't scare
More than
us.
just a sore shoulder.
Stuff happening in my eyes. Feverish. I'm feverish.
Which medicine was
Pfizer.
it? Pfizer?
Either Pfizer. Yeah.
That the really
So as
frozen
someone
one?
who's someone with a deep-seated phobia of needles, this is not something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah,
Oh.
they discontinue. Aren't they like removing like the Moderna one? Aren't they
There
like
was one lot. There was one lot
Yeah.
that caused a lot of, reactions.
Ms. Tilton, it looks like Will is somehow stuck in the public side. Mr. Commissioner McClintock, can we promote him?
Let me work on it.
Hey,
Hey, there he is. Got you on the right side of the little ceremonial wall, right?
excellent. Was that something I did?
No idea.
Oh, okay.
The magic of technology. Good evening, everybody. We will reconvene the meeting at 8:02 p.m. Mr. Churchwell, would you announce any reportable actions taken in closed session?
Yes, Chair Morris, the commission has decided in closed session to interview 3 candidates who are in the pool for the open seat created by the resignation of Commissioner Murty. And the 3 candidates are either Latinx or Republican.
And that will happen next week.
And those interviews will take place at the next meeting. And of course, that is subject to the commission's invitation to interview being accepted by those 3 candidates.
Thank you, sir. Item 8.
Chair Morris, I'm sorry, during the public comment, I failed to list the written public comments that were received. We had 2 written comments received. One from Janet Blevins recommending replacing Lada Murty with Jennifer Harden, and one from Common Cause hosting a redistricting workshop on January 28th.
Thank you. Appreciate you catching those. Commissioners, item number 8 is discussion, deliberation, and possible action regarding the Republican Party and Hispanic Chamber letter. Is there any discussion beyond what we've done so far tonight? All right, seeing none, we're going to go to item number 9, acceptance of letter of resignation of Commissioner Lada Murty and action regarding possible action regarding filling the vacancy. Mr. Tilton, do you want to do a quick staff report, or Mr. Johnson, one of you, just to get everybody up to speed on this item?
Let me follow up briefly. Obviously, it's related to what was just reported out, but that did trigger one thought, which is if one of the interviewees is not available Monday evening, would the commission be open to an interview later in the week, or do you want to get through this all on Monday?
Hopefully won't be an issue.
I'm willing to have another evening.
I'd be open to flexibility.
Me too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I will
Same.
also.
It's just depending on the time is all.
We'll obviously strongly encourage them to be there Monday evening because we'd like to get through this and get back to a full commission. But if not, we'll get whatever other times are available and circle back with all of you, because we both reschedule that interview. And of course, you then take action on who you want to select right after that interview. So we would want everyone there.
Very well.
And Chair Morris, I did want to report that upon learning that Commissioner Murty had to resign due to conflict of interest, I did call the other 2 finalists that were interviewed previously, and Amanda Ochoa is interested in being considered for appointment. However, Jennifer Harden is not. So she is not being considered. So as reported out in closed session, we'll be contacting 3. One of those will be Amanda Ochoa. And as I understand, we'll be giving her the option if she wants to repeat her interview, or will this commission will be given the video link to view her previous interview that took place on December 7th.
Thank you for that clarification. Is there any public comment regarding item number 9? Is there anybody from the public? And by the way, let me again congratulate the 16 people who either stuck with us or left their computers on.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Mr. Gray.
Would it be possible when you call the 3 people, if they're not available to meet with us next Monday night, is it possible to have them meet before Monday so that when we meet Monday, we can make a decision Monday instead of meeting them after Monday and then having to have another meeting? Do you know what I'm saying?
Johnson?
Unfortunately, the posting deadline for a meeting is too short.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Appreciate you trying to move the calendar forward. I believe we do, although this is a formality, I believe we do need to accept this letter of resignation. So is there anybody who wishes to make a motion to accept this letter
I will
with our
make-
with our expression of appreciation to her for being willing to serve?
With
Mr. Turley, did I hear a motion?
yes,
Very
with
good. Is there
very
a
deep
second?
appreciation.
I second.
Commissioner Katz seconds. Ms. Tilton,
Commissioner Katz,
Aye.
Commissioner Twiebell,
Aye.
Commissioner McClintock,
Aye.
Commissioner Turley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Reluctantly, aye.
Commissioner Hudley,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Except with regrets.
Commissioner Rios,
I, my appreciation for you, Dr. Murthy.
Commissioner Omedo,
Aye.
and Chair Morris.
aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Agenda item 10, a discussion, deliberation, and possible action on adopting bylaws. Mr. Churchwell, I believe you get to lead us off on this. We'd probably do better if we didn't have to read your lips, sir. You're muted.
Thank you so much. I'm glad I can unmute myself instead of one of you vetoing that. So that's a good thing. So if everyone has a copy of the proposed bylaws in front of them, I am not going to go through this line by line. So I know that I think obviously we're going to take suggestions from the commission and from the public comment as well. So what I will say is what the purpose of these bylaws is to try to fill in the details that the ordinance leaves out. We can't contradict the ordinance with bylaws. We can only sort of supplement and make clear and make specific, as they say. And that's what we tried to do in this proposal. So they're tried to be very thorough in terms of all of the areas, just from experience that might come up. So what I'll do now is I'm going to open it up to any comments from the commission. If we could, if any of you would like to-
Let's see if there's any public comments first, and then the commission can kind of wrap that up. So members of the public will entertain any public comments related to the proposed bylaws. If you'll use the raise your hand, and Ms. Tilton will call on anyone who wishes to speak.
And I don't see any hands raised.
Very well. We'll bring this back to the commission.
There was
Ms.
one question.
Commissioner
in the
Turley.
Q&A. There was a question in the Q&A.
On the Q&A on the chat, there's a question.
Very good. The question is, when will the names of the 3 applicants who are being considered be announced? I think that would be when they have accepted the invitation, and it'll be part of the meeting agenda. Okay, commissioners, any comments, any feedback, any changes that you would like made to these draft bylaws? Mr. Commissioner Olmedo.
Just one, look pretty good, pretty straightforward. Just one small typo. I think Article 4, Section 2, just the 3 of the initial commission of 5 members, missioners. Just, not to be nitpicky, but just clean up some small little typos. I have no issues with the bylaws. In everything to go, pretty straightforward. Just some small typos, but overall looks good.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else catch anything? Mr. Bradley.
Just for clarification, under Section 8, that's pretty clear. However, I wonder if legal counsel could advise us if we are approached or queried by members of the press, how shall we handle such?
And just so those who are listening, it's Article 2, Section 8 on page 19 of the packet and page 2 of the proposed bylaws, just so everybody's looking at the same information. So what that says is commissioners shall not communicate orally or in writing on the subject of redistricting on any internet platform or social media website. This section is not intended to limit the agendas or information regarding the date, time, and place of upcoming commission meetings. So the intent of that was definitely to include speaking with the media. So in other words, no commissioner has the authority to speak with the press, what we used to call the press, which we call the media, I guess now, about, to represent the commission. Certainly you have every right to speak with a member of the press about your own views about anything. If that answers the question.
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
Commissioner Katz.
Yeah, I had a question. I think I need a better explanation. Article 2, Section 5. Commissioners shall not communicate outside of a public meeting with any member of the Board of Supervisors or member staff regarding redistricting. Does it say except the chair? This section shall not restrict the commission chair from communicating with staff regarding purely administrative. I just can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
Well, the way that the chair in every public agency that I've been involved with is someone who's going to deal with, as this says, I mean, the best way I could figure out to write it is purely administrative matters. So no substantive issues, no, but just the logistics of keeping us sort of on track and making sure that it's become very obvious that we are, with regard to the selection of legal counsel, we are in getting our conflict of interest code approved. I mean, the county and the commission are going to be having discussions, and what that is designed to do is to say the person who's really in charge of administrative matters is, works with staff on that, is going to have an exception to the first sentence to deal with those administrative matters, because otherwise there's no way this can work, right? We can't get an agenda put together. We can't, there's a lot of things that have to happen behind the scenes to get this put together administratively. So that's what it is intended to do.
And let me add just briefly that where this come in hand, where this gets triggered by almost every commission is budget. So the chair is essentially the commission spokesperson to the supervisors to ask for more budget if needed.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Nice to know we can at least ask for budget. Commissioner Turley.
Yeah, I had a question about section 12, a vacancy shall occur upon the following occurrence. I'm curious if the bylaws have anything to say, or if this is part of the ordinance, about something like someone moving away and not resigning, or violating a code of ethics, or not disclosing ex parte communications, things like that, of that nature, where they may not be resigning, but they're also in violation of something. Is that covered elsewhere? Or, God forbid this were to happen, obviously. The assumption and hope is that it won't, but we certainly should plan for it if it's not already planned for.
So we've got the two, if someone moved away, that's covered by section 12B. I've had a lot of experience. We had a city council member who had moved to another state, and sort of everyone knew it. But the only real way to do anything about that kind of thing is you just don't show up for the meetings, right? If you're going to travel back, and now of course with Zoom, it's a good issue to raise, right? I mean, in drafting this, you think about, well, is this pandemic going to go on long enough that we start to have to, you know, change what we've been doing for all these decades to address things that we never, someone, you know, dialing in from Europe or something. Is that okay? And right now, the way this is written, as long as people come to the meetings via Zoom, it doesn't really say where they have to be. They have to be in the county. So that this certainly is just our best efforts to cover someone who just moved away and stopped going to the meetings. That would definitely be covered by B. And B could be, you know, it could be written a lot of different ways. It could be, some people say 2-3 consecutive meetings. Some bylaws, this is just kind of, again, just my experience, sort of all melded together is how this kind of is drafted.
And Mr. Churchwell, I know the ordinance also covers vacancy, and it says that the commissioners shall be removed upon occurrence of any of the followings. And one is failing to attend a majority of the publicly noticed meetings within a 3-month period. Then the next bullet point is, it's determined upon the basis of information not provided in the commissioner's application to serve that the commissioner is not qualified under the provisions of a previous subsection, or the commissioner has ceased to be qualified under the provisions due to events or circumstances occurring after filing his or her application. So I think if they moved out of their out of the jurisdiction, certainly that would be one of the qualifiers. So there is additional language in the ordinance.
Should we add those to the bylaws, or would that just be redundant?
We could, we try not to repeat the ordinance, right? I mean, we try to just fill in. We could just sort of repeat everything. And to answer, you know, the question about ethics violations, those laws have their own sort of provisions that would say, like a violation of Government Code Section 1090 would result in the person not being able to serve in public office. So that's part of the deal. They would have to resign, and then they couldn't serve ever again in elective or appointed office. So we don't really repeat those things that are in those ethics laws because they kind of take care of that.
Excellent. And I think Commissioner Katz had something to say.
Yeah, Commissioner Katz, and then I have a comment on this particular sentence as well. Commissioner Katz?
Yeah, so I might be mixing things up, but in the Brown Act, I thought it was very clear that you couldn't attend a meeting unless it was identified as the jurisdiction. Do I get that? Did I understand that correctly? So if I, you know, chose to fly to Cancun and you guys were having a meeting, I technically couldn't participate in that meeting because it's not in the jurisdiction. Mr. Churchwell, am I?
And I'm not aware of that provision.
So
it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I'm not aware of that provision.
And Mr. Church, I believe there's actually some, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that there's been some additional relaxing of that item by the governor as part of the pandemic rules.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to think.
I think in the past it was, if you were meeting somewhere, if you were on vacation and wanted to,
if you were in the
dial
airport,
you would have to post it at your location as if it was
right.
the city hall or wherever. And I think that requirement has been restricted, has been relaxed. by the governor for the duration of the emergency, whatever that
Okay.
language is. Going back to,
Chair Morris, I did want to say there's additional language in addition to what I had said about vacancy and removing commissioners.
yeah, there's a number of items here. And Mr. Churchwell, I'm wondering if we could just edit 12B to simply say a finding by the commission that a commissioner has ceased to be qualified under the provisions of the ordinance. And just refer back to this laundry list that's in the ordinance that way.
Definitely. That makes sense to me.
Anybody else have anything that they wanted to clarify or modify on the bylaws? If no, I would entertain a motion to adopt the draft with the change we just discussed.
Motion to adopt the bylaws with a stated change.
Commissioner Romero motions and Commissioner Rios, are you seconding? Thank you. Ms. Tilton.
Commissioner Katz,
Aye.
Commissioner Twiebell,
Aye.
Commissioner McClintock,
Aye.
Commissioner Turley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Aye.
Commissioner Rios,
Aye.
Commissioner Olmedo.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Very well. Item 11, discussion, deliberation, and possible action on adopting a code of interest code resolution. Mr. Churchwell, I believe this is you again.
I am pleased to be on the agenda twice in a row. I don't know if lawyers should ever, you really should probably break us up, but we'll plow right through. So I had drafted a very nice 2-page conflict of interest code for you to consider. I don't know if that ever got distributed, but then we found out, it occurred to me, and I probably had some help from the county staff and Ms. Anderson saying, well, the code reviewing body for the code that we adopt is the Board of Supervisors, and they have to approve it. And they have a very particular way they want it written. And so it fits into the county's code. And so that's why you have the draft that you have in front of you, which is quite a bit longer than 2 pages, but it really accomplishes exactly the same thing, which is that you are all, obviously all the commissioners and the staff that's listed are included in the conflict of interest code, and everyone in the code has category 1 as their disclosure category, which means you all have full disclosure. So you have to disclose investments, real property in the county, income from businesses doing business in the jurisdiction, and loans and gifts. And so if anybody has any questions about, obviously about disclosure, we've kind of had some ongoing discussions, but basically it says here, must file Form 700 with all schedules. That's not exactly, that's just the way it's worded on page 24 of the packet, Exhibit B, but really what it means is that you potentially have to file all the schedules. You could simply be that you have nothing to report on your Form 700 because you don't meet any of the criteria for disclosure of certain things. Your primary residence, for example, in the county would not be disclosed. So everyone has full disclosure, and that's what category 1 means. And we are adopting the Fair Political Practice Commission standard code. So we're not varying it. We're not doing anything fancy to try to draw lines that that would be, you know, some kind of one-off type code. It's not really that important since all of you have full disclosure anyway. So we're just adopting the standard FEPC code. And what that does for the commission is if the FEPC amends that regulation, you automatically get your code updated. So when they're up there fretting and worrying about all these things all the time, and they have tons of staff to do that and the money to do that, you get the benefit of your code being updated whenever the FEPC updates that regulation that tells us what the standard code is. So that's pretty much it. I wish it were, you know, there's really not that much to more detail I can give you, but I'm certainly will open it up to questions, public or from you.
So let's quickly see if there's any comments from the public related to the code of the conflict of interest code.
And I don't see any hands raised.
Very well, bring this back to the commission. Commissioner Bradley, I believe you had a comment or question.
Mr. Churchwell, could we examine paragraph H as in hotel? It states there that section requires that each commission member shall be a designated employee for purposes of the conflict of interest code adopted and so forth. I'm not sure I understand. As I recall, previously, we were disqualified if we were a county employee. Could you clarify that part of that paragraph, please?
That's a great question. So that is a term of art. It is nothing to do with the labor code, with whether you're an officer or an employee. What it means is that there's only two ways to file a Form 700. One is if you're listed in Government Code Section 87200. We call that an Article 2 filer, and those are people like people on the City Council, Board of Supervisors. The people that are listed there, they are required to file a Form 700. Everyone else in the whole universe of public officials are either designated by their agency. So it's not the county doing it, we're doing it. We're saying the commissioners and these other people listed on the staff, they have to file, and everyone is a designated employee. They're known as Article 3 filers because that is listed in Government Code Section 87300, that the legislature did not mandate that any of you be file a Form 700. Your agency mandated that. And so the only term we have for those people is designated employee. So that you're right, I never really thought about it, but you're certainly none of you are employees. And certainly not employees of the county.
Other comments or questions? Steve, Mike just wanted me to clarify, we're essentially agreeing to the county's ordinance. Is that? We're adopting an ordinance that will, or a resolution that mirrors the county's protocol. We are adopting the FEPC standard conflict of interest code, which is contained in one of their regulations. And you will be the ones that choosing who goes in as designated employees and what category they, that is dictated by the ordinance that you're going to have full disclosure. So that's category 1. So we don't really have much of an option on that. Then it goes over to the Board of Supervisors, and the way it's sort of the format of the FEPC's regulation is put into the county conflict of interest code, which is part of their code, their municipal code, and is in that format. So the only thing the county's really doing is approving it and codifying it. So it's listed in their, and just with all the other agencies' codes. Very well, thank you. Anybody else? If not, I would accept a motion to adopt the resolution as drafted in your packets.
So moved.
Commissioner Gray makes the motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Commissioner Katz, thank you for the second. Ms. Hilton,
Commissioner Katz,
Aye.
Commissioner Twyfell,
Aye.
Commissioner McClintock,
Aye.
Commissioner Turley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Hudley,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Aye.
Commissioner Rios,
Aye.
Commissioner Olmedo,
Aye.
and Chairman.
aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is update on NDC's collection of GIS data and maps from the county departments and city governments. Mr. Johnson, I'm guessing this one's yours.
Yes, good evening, and also want to introduce, I think he's turning on his camera, Daniel Phillips from our team, who's been working hard on this. This will be very brief. Unlike the conflict of interest code that we hope will never bring back before you, this GIS data will be coming back before you a lot. So what we're trying to get is really a huge resource of data, and Dr. Phillips has been great about knowing all these different obscure GIS files. And so he's been working with the county GIS folks and all the city GIS folks to try to collect it. You see the list in the packet of what we're going after. We don't expect that all this data will exist. This is an extremely comprehensive list, but once we get it all, then we'll package all this together, and the maps that you see and our interactive maps online will have all these layers so that people can turn them on and off as they do their work. So we just want to give you a sense at this point of what we're looking for. I know some of you have a background in this, and some interested members of the public have a background in this. So if there is things out there that you've heard of, we're happy to go collect those as well. And mainly wanted to introduce newly minted PhD, Daniel Phillips. He's been at it for a couple months now, and to the team. And as we go forward, you'll be seeing him a lot as he presents this data to you as we get into training and sessions like that.
Well, first of all, Mr. Phillips, congratulations. And second, welcome to our late night gathering. We appreciate your efforts on this. Anything you want to correct or update from Mr. Johnson's presentation?
No, I think he covered it well. We're still in the process of gathering data. We've reached out to all the different cities within the county as well as the county itself. And we've gotten a lot of data so far, but we're hoping to get a lot more. And so I'm just working with what I have so far, and hopefully in the future, I'll have even more that I can present to you.
Very well, thank you for that. Commissioner McClintock.
Just a quick question, Daniel. So what's the plan for getting these data made available online, and exposing them through interactive maps, but also just making the data so we can access them and read their metadata? Where are they going to live?
I think I'll have Doug take that one.
It's actually a great question. One of the challenges we run into is a lot of counties these days have already collected all this data, and we just pull it off the web and boom, we're done. Santa Barbara is not one of those. So I think this will be a very useful resource. We don't know where it will live yet, but certainly we will be talking to folks, because we're doing this rather than the individual GIS departments. There's no buy-in for them to keep updating it, but this will be a very useful resource that we will put somewhere. We just don't know where yet. But just a foreshadow for Commissioner Hudley, and actually for you, there's a good chance we may be making some calls to UCSB at some point in this process to host the final data set. Because I think you're right. It will be, as you're saying, this data is not compiled in any one place yet. And so it'll be very useful to a lot of people afterwards.
Yep, great.
Good. Any other questions or comments from members of the commission? Mr. Bradley.
Daniel, could you please comment briefly on the differences, if any, in data between incorporated cities and unincorporated areas of the county?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have data from the county that it varies between being countywide, that covers the entirety of the county. And then there's also data that only applies to the unincorporated areas. And so and then the individual cities have their own separate data files. And so once I hear from all the cities, for example, get each city's zoning data, our land use, then I am going to hopefully be able to merge or combine each individual city's zoning data with each other, as well as the zoning data from the unincorporated areas that the county provides. But there are other things that I have countywide that applies to both unincorporated and incorporated areas, such as zip codes, as well as census geographies, such as tracts and block groups and things like that. And there are also fire protection districts and law enforcement districts and so on. So it really is quite a variety, but your point is well taken that there are certain data that I have that just apply to unincorporated areas that must be merged somehow with the data we get from the individual cities.
Commissioner Curley and then Commissioner McClintock.
Congratulations, Dr. Phillips, first off. And I had a question that kind of ties into both the county data and the Lompoc data, which is that it looks like Lompoc is significantly less filled out than the rest of the other cities. So I'm curious to hear what your experience has been in gathering data in that in particular, and if you think that there's any other way that we can get that information. And second, is the county data pretty, is it complete for all of the individual cities, or did you find that there were missing parts of the county data that corresponded with cities like Lompoc? If that makes sense.
Yeah, so I'll take your first question first about Lompoc. Maybe there was an error in the table, or maybe there was a miscommunication or misunderstanding, but Lompoc was actually one of the first to give us the vast majority of their data. Or they gave us all the data that was applicable that we requested. And so it's actually the other cities we're waiting on. And I was in contact with Goleta today, and they're working on it. I was in contact with Santa Barbara, and they are hopefully going to be able to have something by the next meeting. But each city goes at its own pace. So Lompoc was on the ball, and we'll hopefully have the others soon. Do you mind repeating your second question?
Yeah, so just to clarify on the Lompoc question, it's just more that there is no information for the business improvement districts and the master plan communities, official neighborhoods, and police precincts were not available, but maybe there's some explanation you could provide there. I'll let you answer that first.
Yeah, so as far as I could tell, they had no data available for any of that.
Well,
Okay.
and just to clarify, our understanding is because they don't have any of those.
They don't have any. Okay.
Right.
Excellent. And then, the second question.
No one's withholding anything. Just want to
Yeah. No, I absolutely did not mean to imply that if that was what it sounded like. And then the second part is just the completeness of the countywide data in relation to the individual cities. So is the countywide data pretty equally complete for each city, or are there inconsistencies that we'll need to be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so the data I have from the county so far, I'm still waiting for some data from the county as well, seems to be complete as far as what the data actually applies to. So they have zoning data for all the unincorporated areas of the county. They don't have zoning data for the individual cities. They have parks and open spaces for the entire county. But they said that they can only be certain that they have all of them for the unincorporated areas. There might be some within the incorporated areas that are lacking. But as far as I could tell, looking at it, it seems pretty complete to me. There might be a few exceptions, but I'm very pleased with the data we've gotten from the county so far, but we'll see once the rest of the data comes in.
Phillips.
Commissioner McClintock.
This is a question, I guess, for Mr. Johnson and Mr. Phillips, or either or, I'm not sure which one. Is the expectation that the process will proceed with using existing data sets, or is there an opportunity to collect new data? For example, maybe data that describe the distribution of communities of interest in some way that isn't represented in existing data sets, and if so, are there resources to gather those new data?
So let me take it first. So both, I guess. What we found is, communities of interest is a bit of an amorphous term. And what we found to be very useful is to throw a bunch of possible maps up there at hearings and discussions and say, do business improvement districts describe the neighborhoods in your area? That's something people can respond to, and often they say no, but it gets them thinking about it. But yes, we are certainly open to, and we'll be using tools that will let people draw their own communities of interest and sketch those out in a census block map. So yeah, we'll be gathering data. A lot of people, I think, will just confirm, yes, that data reflects my neighborhood or my community of interest. But yes, certainly we're open to and highly encouraging folks to draw additional communities of interest that aren't defined by this data.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Any more? Commissioner Bradley.
Dr. Phillips, on some of these variables that you have here under data, such as census block groups and census tracts, the state of California has indicated quite a number of HTC zones throughout our county. When they say obtained, are they subject to amendment, particularly in light of the delayed census data coming from the federal level? And how will that be dealt with if there are obvious omissions from undercounted or just not counted people in our county?
Yeah, so when it says obtained, what I mean so far is boundaries. So the boundaries of the census tracts and the block groups. And of course, we have population data for these tracts and block groups, but they are very outdated right now. And so we're still waiting on the actual official census data, which will come hopefully sooner rather than later. But there is also the possibility that with the new census data, they will adjust the boundaries of some census tracts and block groups, et cetera. So if that is the case, I will certainly be quick to modify the existing data to reflect the changes that the census made.
Follow-on question, if I may. If there are challenges to any of that census data, and perhaps Mr. Johnson, you can weigh in on this as well. What would be the protocol for handling such challenges if they do arise?
We'll get into this more when we come back to you with the talk about the complete count efforts. But there's really very briefly, there's two issues. One is you will have some flexibility in the population deviations. You don't have to be exactly perfectly equal. You can be off by a couple percent. So sometimes that's used to offset believed undercounts or overcounts. But one of the things we'll come back to is that the statute is pretty clear. You have to use the official census data as posted by the California statewide database. Where there might be challenges to the data would be either through the Bureau's appeals process, which other than super glaring mistakes takes too long to help in redistricting, or in court. And if there's a court challenge to the data, then we'll obviously use whatever's the current legal order. But again, we'll walk through all these things in more detail when we have more of a sense of that and the complete count folks here.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Dr. Phillips, appreciate your update on this item. I don't think there's any action on this one, so we will move on to agenda item 13, a decision on legal assistance contract. And I think we're going to ask Ms. Anderson to find her microphone mute button and do present the staff report on this one. Good evening, Ms. Anderson.
Good evening, commissioners. This item is to consider independent legal counsel for the commission. The Board of Supervisors approved a contract with Caldwell White that terminates January 31st. The intention of what was that this would give your commission the opportunity to choose your independent counsel once the full commission was in place. The county counsel's office put out a request for qualifications for this service, and 4 proposals were received. Those proposals were provided to your commission and are posted on the county's redistricting website. Caldwell White was not a proposer, so Mr. Caldwell is able to advise you through the selection process. And that concludes my introduction of the item.
Very well. Let's follow our normal pattern, and we'll open this item for some public comment. If there's any comment, anybody in the public that wants to make a comment here, please raise your hand. Ms. Tilton will guide us through the list.
We have a request to speak from Lee Heller.
Welcome back, Ms. Heller.
Chair Morrison, commissioners, I am back. We just got these letters, they were just posted. So if you're going to take public comment as part of your deliberation process, I hope you won't make any decisions tonight, although it is exciting to have 4 responses. And the one I was able to read looks promising. So hopefully there's a real opportunity here, but I would just point out that most of us just got a chance to see these. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Welcome back. Any other comments? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so back to the commission. Folks are interested in how you want to proceed to handle this. We have 4 proposals. You've had them maybe a day or so longer than the public. Any recommendations on what we do with these now? Commissioner Bradley.
I'd like to recommend that we forward this to our next meeting next week.
I'd second that.
Would you be open to, I'm thinking back particularly to the original 5 commissioners, you'll recall, we made some good use of some subcommittees early on to take a stab at procedural recommendations. So I'm wondering if the group would be open to tasking a sub-team here to maybe take and develop a review matrix again, similar to what we did with the appointment process, and bring that back to the commission next week for rather than trying to figure out how we're going to score them in mass. If there's 3 or 4 of you that would be open to taking on that task, I think that would that approach has served us well in the past. And wondering if that would be something people would be open to this time as well.
Would we do that without or before or after our counsel from Mr. Churchwell?
I think we could probably take some general direction from him this evening. What I would maybe do is invite him to be part of that team and help with the forming of the review. How are we going to review these 4 in a consistent, what are the criteria we're looking at? Those kinds of things, right? And then maybe, Mr. Churchwell and 3 or 4 commissioners could come back with a matrix of some sort. That was my original kind of thought.
I like that idea.
I do as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, and also, I guess on the final decision-making process, is that something we have to wait for once we have all 11 commissioners seated?
It's probably good practice, but with 10, we could probably, we have a quorum. So if we had to move forward, we could do that. Commissioner Katz had a question or comment?
I'm just wondering about a timeline for this. at what point do we have to have this decision made?
So as you heard, we are a bit on a timeline. We're not going to make the 31st, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. I have a separate proposal to make to you on how we will handle that piece of it. But I think if we were to use this, my expectation would be at our meeting next week, we would review the process and perhaps apply that tool to the four and determine, you know, do we want to interview 1, 2, 3, or 4 of them and schedule those for the next meeting? That will give the public time to weigh in as well. And maybe at that second meeting, we would actually, we would do the interviews and make a determination. Again, similar pattern to what we did with selecting the remaining members of the commission. I think it's possible to get there in 2 weeks, but.
Okay, so your timeline, you're thinking could be 2 weeks.
I think that's the minimum, but if it all falls together, 2 to 3 weeks, depending on when our meetings fall, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So seeing some general consensus on that approach, are there commissioners who would like to volunteer to be part of that subpanel? Commissioner Hudley. Anyone else? Commissioner Turley, like people who raise their hands. We could probably take Commissioner Almeida. Okay. I could take one more, I think, and still stay within the bounds of not having to do a notice meeting. So I think 3 is good. 4 would be okay as well. Commissioner Tribell, thank you. So we will, I will take this as a motion and figure out how to write here. So I'm going to propose as the chair that we nominate Commissioners Hudley, Turley, Almeida, and Twibell with the assistance of Mr. Churchwell as a subcommittee to develop a scoring matrix and process for reviewing the legal counsel applications. Is there a second to that nomination? Commissioner Bradley, thank you. Ms. Hilton, Mr. Johnson, jump in really quickly.
Just want to flag one thing. Given the outstanding issues we talked earlier, do we have a subcommittee that's all one party? We may want to avoid that.
I believe we've got at least 2 of the 3 parties represented.
We get Hudley.
Somebody check me.
I don't think so.
Do we have at least 1 no party preference and 1 Democrat? I think we've got at least 1 of each.
Is Almeida, sorry, I missed Almeida was on there. Okay.
Yeah, I'm no party preference.
Yep.
Excellent. Way to balance it. Appreciate that. So, Ms. Hilton, could we do a roll call on this item?
Commissioner Katz,
I support the proposal.
Commissioner Twibell,
Aye.
Commissioner McClintock,
Aye.
Commissioner Turley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye, and thank you.
Commissioner Hudley,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Aye.
Commissioner Rios,
Aye.
Commissioner Omedo,
Aye.
Chair Morris.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Very well. For the next item on this, I'm going to ask Mr. Churchwell to step out of the room for just a moment. Doug or somebody on his team will text you when we need you back. So commissioners, I'd like to put a motion forward that we ask county council to negotiate an extension to Mr. Churchwell's contract to such time as replacement counsel has been selected and contracted to begin service. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Commissioner Bradley, thank you. Is there any discussion about that? Seeing none, Ms. Tilton, could we take roll call?
Commissioner Katz,
Aye.
Commissioner Twibell,
Aye.
Commissioner McClintock,
Aye.
Commissioner Turley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Hudley,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Aye.
Commissioner Rios,
Aye.
Commissioner Omedo, I'm sorry, did I hear it? Aye?
Aye. sorry. Aye.
And Chair Morris.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Could one of the staff invite the attorney back in so we can
Yep, done.
continue the meeting? There we go.
He'll be back momentarily.
Not much of a break, Mr. Churchwell. Sorry for that. I think he's connecting here. Welcome back, Mr. Churchwell. Sorry, we didn't give you much of a break there. Commissioners, we're on item number 14, discussion and possible direction regarding whether to seek alternative demographic and administrative support firm proposals. Ms. Anderson, are you making the staff report on this, or who's going to tee us up?
So commissioners, really no staff report. This was a request from your commission to bring this item back for consideration, and county staff is here to take any direction that you may have.
Okay. So let's follow our pattern. I think we've got at least one person already raising a hand, so members of the public will open for public comment on item 14. Ms. Tilton, do you want to walk us through the list?
Yes, we have a request to speak from Lindsay Baker, followed by Spencer Brandt.
Good evening, Ms. Baker.
Good evening, Chair Morris and commissioners. I'm speaking, I'm Lindsay Baker, speaking for the Santa Barbara League of Women Voters. We continue to encourage you to follow an open public process for seeking all of your consultants. We recommend that you require a scope of work and timeline that is compatible with our county ordinance and your needs, specifically how the proposer plans to address the requirements of Section 6C, the 7 required hearings to allow the public to present ideas and maps for consideration prior to drawing maps. We understand it is the intent of this ordinance that these hearings come about after the census data is released so that maps can be presented for discussion and consideration. But how and when will the public have this information available? For example, the LA City Redistricting Commission will provide an online mapping tool for the public. Will Santa Barbara County provide such a service? And while GIS mapping software has changed dramatically in the past 10 years, it is still not available or accessible to all. During redistricting 10 years ago, the county had a very open public process where information and GIS expertise was available by appointment to the public free of charge to assist individuals or community groups in drawing potential maps or community of interest areas for submittal and consideration. Given that many of the underrepresented groups may have limited access to computer mapping systems, it is important that there be some consideration given early in the process and the work plan as to who and how this input can be obtained. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, ma'am.
The next speaker is Spencer Brandt, followed by Lee Heller.
Good evening, Mr. Brandt.
Hi, commissioners. Thanks for allowing me to speak. You know, I've been thinking about this issue a lot. You know, in the ordinance that created this body, it really puts the power in all of you, the commissioners, to draw the lines. I think the initiative was called You Draw the Lines. But the truth of the matter is that most of the staff work, or all of the staff work, a lot of the legwork really that goes into what those lines look like, is going to be performed by your demographer, and you want to be able to have a demographer that you can trust and rely upon, and data that you're able to inspire confidence in the process. So I'm troubled. It only really takes a couple of Google searches for your alarm bells to go off regarding the National Demographics Corporation and their reputation. With respect to Mr. Johnson, it's not personal. He seems like a nice guy. But the entire purpose of this commission is to empower regular folks in our county to draw the lines. And Mr. Johnson has kind of spent his career doing the opposite. As a research fellow at the Rose Institute of State and Local Government, which was founded by Thomas Hoefler, the New York Times described him as the father of modern gerrymandering. He has represented Republican legislatures in court when they have been seeking to defend their gerrymandered maps from claims that they are gerrymandered. In one of the cases, which a speaker mentioned earlier in this hearing, Mr. Johnson was on the stand and actually had to disavow the body of work that he was making an argument in favor of those gerrymandered maps because it was found to be inaccurate. His testimony was stricken from the record. So I don't really think that we want this cloud over the process. And I'm really concerned about what this will do for the process if NDC stays on. Some of the maps that they've been involved in drawing, even right here in our state of California, in cities such as Roseville, Palmdale, and Martinez, have been the subject of lawsuits where they've been accused of drawing lines specifically to protect incumbent lawmakers. The spirit of this commission is completely contrary to protecting incumbents. So, you know, I agree there should be an open process with a request for proposals. And I'd point you to one body that's been doing this for 10 years, or not 10 years, but it's their second time around now, the California Independent Redistricting Committee, which they just put out a request for proposals actually 3 days ago for their demographer. They're going through a great open process where they have really specific questions and a scope of work, including technical services, data visualization tools and mapping tools, and staff support and expertise, so they can really have a lot of control over what exactly the staff work ends up looking like. So I encourage you to do that process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker is Lee Heller.
Good evening again, Ms. Heller.
Chair Morris and commissioners, this will be my last time tonight, and I will be brief because it's getting late and you guys, I'm sure, are tired. I'm just going to pick up on what several other speakers have said without repeating it, and starting with Mr. Conlon earlier and then Ms. Baker and Mr. Brandt. I really think an open and transparent process for assessing the key staff who will be supporting your work is in order. Mr. Johnson does seem like a nice guy. I never like to say uncharitable things to people who seem very nice, but I've looked at some of the same information online and I do have concerns. I want this commission to succeed, and I'm concerned that we're already with an issue of inadequate party representation on the commission where your staff did not intervene and advise you, and now you're having to clean up the mess, as they say. And I don't want us to face the same problems around data, around gerrymandered district proposals. So I encourage you to look at proposals, to use the model that the California Independent Redistricting Commission used when you put out your call, and to see if we can come up with staffing that really supports the work that you're going to be doing, because you have a lot of work ahead of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Any more speakers?
I see no other requests to speak.
Very well, thank you. We'll bring this back to the commission for some discussion and direction. Look, I guess I would just, by way of context, point out that we are, somewhat into the process. That doesn't mean we can't make a change here, but it ought to be done with good reason. And I would also point out that different than our legal contract, our legal counsel, where there was in a short-term contract struck with the anticipation of a potential replacement, the same was not done here. So there's a contract in place for the duration. All contracts can be unwound, but just something to consider as we move forward. So with that, anybody have a recommendation to get us started on what our next step is here? Be that move forward with who we have, or begin a process that could potentially lead to something different. Commissioner McClintock.
Well, I don't have a solution, but I would like to dispense with the suggestion that was made in public comment that the demographers are going to be drawing the lines on the map. That's not the case. We haven't set our process out yet on who's going to be drawing the maps. And I think that, Commissioner Bradley has said over and over again that a huge part of our success has to do with outreach and getting people involved and the members of the public in drawing these lines. We don't necessarily have to be the ones who are drawing the lines on the map. And I would say certainly our demographers aren't the ones who are going to be drawing the lines on the map. That shouldn't be a factor as we consider additional, choices for demographers. We have a whole process that we can design that puts the power of the, drawing lines in the hands of whoever we want.
Thank you. Great perspective. Thank you. So maybe let's start with the binary question, which is, does the commission wish to engage in a process which could lead to the appointment of a different demographer service? Or would you like to continue to work with the NDC firm that has been contracted by the county?
I just
Ms.
have a
Weibel?
question. How many firms did the county interview? I mean, do we know what their process was and how long it took? And
Very good question. Ms. Anderson, can I ask you to address that perhaps?
Sure, commissioners, and we touched a bit on this before the other 6 got seated, so it's actually a good refresher. The issue is that when we first took on, this is a new process for the county as well, it was very clear that your commission needed 2 things: independent legal counsel and administrative and demography staff that were in place really from day one. So what the county did was county council identified legal counsel that met the qualifications, that had a background in legal, and the county executive office identified administrative and demography services really by word of mouth. We talked to the cities in the county, and several have engaged NDC quite successfully and recommended them as an option for the commission. We have the authority at the county for any contract under 200,000 to establish that in order to have that set up for when the commission was first meeting, and that's what we did. Obviously, they work at the will of the commission, so it's always known that they could be replaced, but the intention was to get highly qualified folks in place so that you could adequately be advised from the beginning. One unique benefit to NDC is that they obviously have an administrative function in addition to demography. That is not likely to be the case in other demographers. It'll be unique to just focusing on the mapping and data analysis. So that was very helpful for us to have an administrative alternative to running the meetings and being familiar with the Brown Act process and that type of facilitation, so that the county staff is not involved with the process or minimally involved with the process. So that's kind of how we got started, and the background from how we found out about NDC was from the surrounding cities within the county.
Very good. Mr. Bradley.
I have a comment and a question. My comment is I agree completely with my fellow commissioner, McClintock. I mean, the reason we're doing this is because we're trying to take control of this process as the commission and make sure it's done properly, equitably, and done on time. That being stated, Ms. Anderson, if we were to say encounter, let's say NDC went rogue on us and we decided that we couldn't work with them anymore, would we not be able to cease our contract pretty much at any time.
Anytime with a 30-day written notice, correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Romero.
So I guess the comment and a question. I mean, yeah, I think we're in a great position with lots of expertise to make sure it's an open and transparent process. You know, really my two big concerns are maintaining independence and being transparent till we get that good community participation. And so my question is, assuming that the county hired him on a long contract, if the county has a recommendation as to whether or not to continue with NDC.
Well, since we identified them and felt qualified that they were certainly knowledgeable in doing the work, and we have been very pleased with their performance and being able to manage all of the meetings that you guys are establishing. We have no complaints in regard to the performance that they have done for us to date. You know, to me, it's obviously the commission's decision on, you know, in order to keep that independence. But obviously we did what we felt our due diligence in identifying a reputable demographer that was liked and considered at our surrounding cities, and took that as a good sign that they would serve you well. So obviously the recommendation for us would be to continue with the service as long as your commission is satisfied with their work.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Commissioner Turley.
Yeah, I agree with the comments of the other commissioners up to this point. And the only concern that I would raise is that from the public comment, I want to be sensitive to the trust that the community places in us. And I want the community members who commented today and others to feel like they're being represented in this process fairly. So I wonder if in the interest of transparency and making sure that we're bringing everyone along on this process, if there is some value to taking the time to consider all proposals, even if we do end up eventually going with NDC, which up to this point I have not had any complaint with.
Commissioner Rios.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it would be important to listen to what the community has to say, and just, you know, to explore it the same way, you know, we are exploring other options and other items. So yeah, I just, you know, want to reiterate what everybody else is saying. I think it's crucial that we explore that.
Commissioner Bradley, and then Commissioner Katz.
I think Commissioner Rios and Turley, they've both made a very, very important point. I think it's a good idea that if we do decide that for some reason we can't work with NDC anymore, that we need to have an alternate ready to go, at least have gone through a review process so we know who we would replace them with quickly, so we don't then have to go through a search process. So it might be advisable at least to have a choice waiting in the wings if we need that.
Mr. Katz.
Yeah, I agree with that idea. You know, what I'm hearing more than anything from the public with some evidence, stated evidence, but it's more about the lack of transparency. So that seems to be, I think, what I'm hearing mostly from the public, and I agree with Commissioner Turley and every other commissioner that this is because we are part of representing the public and maintaining trust, that having an an alternative in the event we decide that we need to do that, that we're in the ready.
Would the, go ahead, Commissioner Gray.
Well, as a businessman, I might be reluctant to respond to a request for proposal when there's no prospect or a very small prospect that I might be awarded it, or I'm in the hip pocket of a commission that may or may not need me in 3 or 6 months, just as a business person.
You know, commissioners wonder if what you would think if we maybe took a half step in that direction, and rather than having this county publish a full request for proposals, that we ask them to do a request for interest, right? And simply put a hook in the stream and see if anybody would even express an interest in responding. We may find that they're all busy, they're all committed, their staffs are, you know, we're not the only folks doing redistricting. And I'm sure it's not an unlimited pool of you know, firms out there that do this work. We may find at this point that they're all like, not this time, right? So that might be another alternative, would be to simply ask, you know, to put a piece out in, you know, through whatever process they use, for folks to just express interest at this point, without, to Commissioner Gray's point, having to go through the full expense and process and investment of time developing a full proposal, and the staff having to go through and develop a full, you know, scope of work and all of those kinds of steps. Would that be an acceptable approach, Commissioner Gray?
I just wanted to ask Mr. Johnson, how many cities, counties have you guys done in the last 10 years? Do you have some number off the top? I mean, obviously we've heard a few people speak about some things that went wrong, but there's got to be also a large number, I imagine, of things that went well with cities and counties. Can we weigh that, pros and cons, with the scale of justice?
Well, yes, I mean, I'm happy to respond in more detail to what the public's raised. I would note that none of our plans drawn for any local government ever that in the districting or redistricting process has ever been overturned by a court. So what you're hearing a lot of quotes without necessarily hearing the results of those cases. But yeah, so of the I think we're at about 140, 145 cities that have moved to bi-district elections because of the California Voting Rights Act. We did the line drawing for, I think my last count was 122 of them. So 122 out of 140. The next biggest firm is actually, or the next biggest group is actually cities that let the plaintiffs draw the map for them. So yeah, so the next biggest demographer who's out there has done, I think, 6 cities. And we did all the counties that, except for 2 last time that had outside consultants too. So we've done about 300 of these projects to date, including the ones I just talked about. And like I said, none have ever been overturned by a court.
And I do think it's important to acknowledge a point that Mr. Johnson briefly made there. We've had a number of members of the public make statements. They are statements, right? We've not engaged in any effort to fact check or validate those, nor frankly have we invited Mr. Johnson to provide a defense or a rebuttal. We could do that if that helps in the transparency. We could ask him to respond to specific cases that some of you or others maybe would like addressed. That could be a step in the transparency process. Maybe at our next meeting we could, you know, identify a list of, you know, here's 6 or 7 or 2 or 5 or whatever specific cases that people have raised concerns about, and allow him to address them. And then maybe make a decision at that point about whether we're satisfied with his responses or want to take a different action. So I think there's a couple of different options here. Wondering if somebody wants to be bold and put a motion on the table to move us forward, whether that's table this and address it at a future date, as Mr. Bradley identified as an option earlier, engage in some sort of a transparency exercise, request statements of interest from additional firms, or ask the county to engage in a full-blown request for proposals and establish a process for selecting a demographer moving forward. Commissioner Gray, you had your hand raised, and then Commissioner Bradley after.
I move that we table this discussion and press on with NDC. I'm quite comfortable with their experience and how they've supported us. And we all know how easy it is for any group to litigate something that they don't like on any of these. We've learned firsthand.
So Commissioner Bradley, before I come to you, let me put us in a proper posture. Is there a second to the motion that's been made by Commissioner Gray?
So, I mean, I will second the tabling, but I would want to add that for me, it's really more of a indication of saying I would prefer to do more research and kind of think it through instead of making, you know, a knee-jerk reaction based on, you know, some statements that were made that we really don't have the full brevity of, you know, what has actually happened. So I just don't feel comfortable voting on it at this point in time.
Okay, so you will second it so we can move forward with the.
Yeah, exactly. I would definitely second to move forward to push this down the line a little bit.
And I think you make a good point. If we table it, we can always bring it off the table at some future date. So we have a motion by Commissioner Gray, a second by Commissioner Hudley to table this issue. Is there any discussion around that motion? And Commissioner Bradley, you had raised your hand earlier, so I'll go to you first if you want to make a comment at this point in the process.
I was going to recommend that we proceed with a request for interest, just so we have a list. It may take some time to generate that, and just so that we have that available so that we can proceed from those options. But if we want to put that off till another meeting, we can do that.
Well, or if this motion fails, we can come back to that. If those are always a choice. Commissioner McClintock, and you're next.
And I would just like to invite members of the public to, you know, provide us with, you know, specific issues they'd like us to address, or they'd like Mr. Johnson to address with respect to NDC's past and you know, record. I'm a little uncomfortable with, you know, the notion that we've got to do a couple Google searches to find out, you know, something about NDC. I want to know what the issues are that the members of the public want us to, or want, you know, or have with NDC. So please come forward with those ideas.
And that could be done through the public comment email address.
Yes.
Very well. Any other discussion, or are you ready for a vote? Commissioner Gray.
I think my motion could be adjusted to table it, but also with what Commissioner Bradley's recommending, look around for some other companies that could do the job. We know it's a bad year for everybody. They're all probably really busy, but my motion could be adjusted to accommodate Commissioner Bradley's desire to get a few other company names. I'd be willing to do that.
Commissioner Turley, I'm coming to you in just a moment, but let me just double check process wise. Who's our parliamentarian here? Is that you, Ms. Tilton?
It was Commissioner Hudley who seconded the motion.
He would need to accept that amendment. Is that right? Keep it in moving forward?
I think we follow Rosenberg's, which allows that.
Okay, so Commissioner Hudley, are you okay with, will you renew your second to that amended motion?
Right. So I'm seconding that we will table it, but we will also allow interest from other demographers. Was that the understanding, right?
If you would, I would state that as ask staff to build a list of potential firms.
All right. All right, so yes, I second that.
Okay. Now, Commissioner Turley.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, that hopefully that can also include a chance for Mr. Johnson and NDC to also respond to the public comments as part of the interest in filling out our understanding of the field as well as that context.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that we invite them to speak after the next round. Any other discussion? Or are you ready for the vote? Don't see anybody raising their hands, so we will vote on the motion, that amended motion, which I believe is to table the consideration we're going to table the consideration of replacing our demographer and administrative support firm while asking staff to build a list of potential alternatives. Ms. Tilton.
Commissioner Katz,
Aye.
Commissioner Twiebell,
Aye.
Commissioner McClintock,
Aye.
Commissioner Turley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Hudley,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Aye.
Commissioner Rios,
Aye.
Commissioner Omedo,
Aye.
Chair Morris.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, folks, we got one other item here to do before we get out of here. If you go to the last page of your packet, I believe it's page 96. The list of items that different members of the commission have, or that are ongoing items, put on our list as future agenda items. Anybody need to add anything to that list at this point? Then you want to request be added to our next agenda? Commissioner Turley.
I just wanted to check in on the letter from a public comment in regards to attending a workshop around redistricting, and if we were going to discuss that at all before the date of the event.
I believe that all we can do is we can't, well, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say we can't all go as a group, but we probably
Okay.
should for Brown Act reasons.
Right.
By providing it to the commissioners, you now have the choice to respond if you want to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I believe it's going to be recorded.
Oh, even better.
Yeah.
So we can, if we can get a copy of the recording, we can share that.
Yeah, I think you may need to register to get the recording. Is that what I understood? Do you know? That's what it seemed.
Okay, Commissioner McClintock.
But if we register and attend, we don't need to represent. In fact, we probably shouldn't represent the commission. Is that correct?
Right.
Well, it does ask you what your title is when you register. I've registered. So I'm not sure we're going to see everybody's faces there. It's probably going to be a webinar kind of situation where they're showing slides on their faces. But I will, if I get the link, I can always send it to Charlize and she could send it out to you or something afterwards.
Okay, and again, I think that link is in the flyer that was included in our public comment packet today.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, let me just add to, knowing Common Cause, if we contact them and ask them for a link to it, I'm sure they'll be thrilled to share it, and it should be no problem to get that link out.
Maybe that's the best approach, is so that we can circulate and we can all watch it individually rather than skipping up to the line there. Okay, so you see the items that are here before, that are on our list for our next meeting, which according to my calendar is scheduled for next Monday, January the 25th. I don't, Mr. John or Mr. Hilton, can you remind me, have we calendared meetings past the 25th yet?
We have not.
Okay, I know we had discussed moving to a first and third Monday kind of a cadence, which I think works well given the couple of the things that we have in motion right now. So that would mean the following meeting would be February the 1st. So we'll be meeting the next 2 weeks And then we would hopefully be able to then move to the 15th, which, so anyway, that would be the expectation, is that we will meet next Monday, and then we will move to a first and third Monday cadence, pending unknown, changes that we need to make. Anything else, Commissioner Bradley?
I noticed the 15th is President's Day. Does that interfere at all with any of the county staff?
Ms. Anderson, are you all working on February the 15th?
We are, let's see. Yeah, it's a holiday for us.
So perhaps we should, can we agree that we'll do the 1st and the 22nd in February? Is that okay? For the moment, that's our plan. We're sticking to it at least for another week. Anything else for the good of the order from any members of the commission? Commissioner Turley.
I just want to say that I'm going to be out of town on the 1st of March, so please don't schedule anything on that day.
If we do, we'll make sure we figure out a way that you can still join us. I think we have some options this time. Mr. Doug Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, we had talked about the census, and actually the census complete count woman is scheduled for Monday's meeting. I'm just looking at the agenda and realizing you're going to have the legal discussion and the interviews of the potential commissioners. So I want to check in. Do you still want to have the complete count at that meeting, or should we push it back to the 1st? Since it's a commission requested item, I didn't want to do anything.
We're gonna have discussions after the interviews, I'm sure.
I'm okay with delaying that again one more week, but Commissioner Brad, I believe that was originally your request, so let me defer to you. Are you okay with us inviting the complete count folks to come in 2 weeks instead of 1 week?
Yes. And I mean, plus a lot of the other census data is running late anyway, right? So I don't think we're losing anything.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly
The
plenty of time.
director just resigned, so.
For whatever that impact is. Very well. With that, folks, I want to acknowledge the members of the public that have hung with us. We appreciate your interest and engagement in this process. I also want to thank the commissioners for a very, while we've been at this a while, I actually think we were pretty efficient this evening in getting through a very heavy agenda, and I appreciate that. Would encourage you all to express our appreciation to your significant others and those that spent the evening without you. With that, we'll wish you all a good evening.
Thank you.